Over the course of human history, diseases have been something that has always terrified us. The main issue that was and still is today with a lot of these ailments is that they are poorly understood, even more so prior to the last 200 years. With the advent of germ theory, we began to understand that they could be caused by microscopic organisms transmitted from various different vectors, which would invade your body and induce the symptoms and sickness that could be seen. Initially, bacteria would be discovered as our methods would become more refined, to which we'd be able to discover viruses, and, well, that kind of only further complicated things. These contractable diseases are responsible for bringing great woe upon humanity and have been a constant fight to overcome them ever since. Hopefully one day we will look back at illnesses in much the same way we can hopefully look at food scarcity in the modern era, which is still a problem, but it's kind of a more prevalent and relic of the past. To this point, in a lot of ways, we have become much better at managing them, and as the years pass, our knowledge on how to cure or ease the symptoms of an illness have gotten better. Except with prions. There is absolutely nothing we can do about prions at this current point in time, and if you get those, sorry bro, it's about game over in 4 to 6 months after showing symptoms. You wanna know what scares a microbiologist? Prions. But even before germ theory was a thing, the knowledge that something like the plague was associated with rats, even though people weren't really sure at the time how rats caused the plague, was happening. Which, fun fact for you, the plague is still around. People catch it all the time in Colorado and in the Rockies in general. We just have antibiotics to treat it now. And also, to balance out the fun that we're having, not fun fact, there was recently within the last few years an antibiotic-resistant version that popped up in Madagascar. Don't worry about it though, I'm sure it'll be fine. Moving on. We have also known throughout history there seemed to be just a particular bloodline that may be cursed with something that seemed to follow them and their descendants like a literal curse. It would typically be placed like blame on the family for that type of issue or something, like maybe their kin did something in the past that warranted this punishment. Known as genetic diseases, at the time, nobody knew about DNA, so it was unknown why a certain affliction would just be happening. Sort of like the Habsburg jaw guy, who was the product of a family continuing to hook up with one another because they were nobility. His kidneys were said, no, not his kidneys, I believe his testicles were said to be black and shriveled and smaller than normal. Definitely a problem. It's all coming back to me. But people just couldn't figure out why this particular trait would become more amplified, or why like a deformity or maladaptation of the body would present itself not only in one person, but in their descendants as well. The human genome, as we now know, has half the chromosomes come from the mother and the other half come from the father. With the combination of two parents and the recombination events known as meiosis within each individual, typically this is to promote genetic diversity and give the newly fertilized cell the best chance at surviving and staving off issues such as an illness coming through that area. It's really hard for a disease to take out everyone if their genes are different. Unless, of course, you're hit with Yersinia pestis, in which case, good luck. But there are certain issues that can be linked to specifically one parent's chromosomes that cannot be bred out. Well, not yet anyways, until we have CRISPR nailed down a little better, and then we can. But to this end, it brings us to today's topic. In the events of wear, a man who exhibits an extremely rare genetic disease that has appeared to shift to a new chromosome based on what we will see would cause him to change, and this change would be induced by the moon, where he would become violent. Passed down through generations, this specific genetic defect could be traced back to his uncle and probably even further past that, indicating that it is a recessive gene or another genetic aberration that we will see based on morphological characteristics. However, it also seems to be communicable under certain parameters, and with that, it means it can be spread. But what is this disease? What is pathophysiology? And how might this happen in real life? Let's discuss that in today's episode. All right, dog, I'm gonna record myself and send this to you. If I don't, just go ahead and delete it. We kick off today's story with like 12 production companies. We meet a woman who is at a hospital and she appears to have been attacked by something and is being questioned by the police there. She begins recounting her tale by saying it was dark, but the sky was bright as there was a full moon that night. As the family hung out having fun looking at a moon, they are out there for a meteor shower that night. The dog then runs off barking at something as Henry goes to check on it. It's always good when you're camping alone and a quadruped goes running off because it smells something. Walking towards the woods, the dog then yelps, which is absolutely your indicator to move away from the woods and not continue to sit there calling after your dog. But because he does, Henry then gets pulled in. Immediately, this creature descends upon the family as she's knocked down and starts watching the thing eat her offspring alive. That is some pretty brutal stuff. Shortly after, we see a media storm of people saying it was an animal, and apparently this American family was vacationing in France. There's your first problem. The wolf siege of Paris, the beast of Gévaudan. Have you never heard of these things before? Also, I'm covering the wolf siege of Paris on Roanoke Tales if you want to look at that. But as the woman continues describing the creature, She says it had hair all over and the hands were huge. We also meet Klaus Pister, which I'm sure it's Pistor, but I'm not going to add the French flair to that every single time, and he's in the media interviews. And believe it or not, I met this guy in real life. He's actually a really nice dude. Took a picture with them after I left my wife in the car running because I forgot to put it in park when I saw him. And then there was this really awkward moment where he's like, oh, hey, wife of Roanoke Gaming, which I think you guys know her name is Erica at this point. Do you want a picture with me? And she's like, no. Erica, you're embarrassing me in front of the talent. Anyways, they say it's not an animal attack, it's a person attack. Of course, what we will see, I mean, it would take a lot for a man to do this, but they do arrest a man named Talon. His name is literally Talon. Okay, so as we now have lawyers involved, her name is Catherine Moore. As she gives an interview in her office, a nerd by the name of Gavin shows up and talks with her. He just flew in and is an animal expert who's there to help Kate with her case. We then meet the third guy of the trio, who's your typical, oh, I got my first PhD at 19 and then my second at 22, and now I'm too smart and all the women love me. It's also evidence that my entire life I've never actually been punched in the face for saying stupid things to people. Is today the day that changes? Hopefully. You know, that whole trope. Anyways, again, his name is Eric, but they fill Gavin in on what's going on. Eric says, if you need anything, including the icky sticky, then I can get it. He's trying way too hard to be cool. You're not cool, man. I don't like you. Anyways, don't be an Eric no matter how intelligent you are. Gavin just wants to examine what's left of the meat suits as quickly as possible to determine exactly what caused the attack. And if he could do that, hilariously, this whole thing would have been solved in about 3 minutes under normal conditions. As they watch the footage from the mom, she lost her left eye, and her face is completely destroyed, it appears. Of course, everything's flipped, so it looks like she lost her right eye. She didn't. Pister and Kate discuss Talon as she says his appearance is unique, and the police were able to arrest him based on that. But she disagrees, which, I mean, definitely lawyer up, like absolutely you should, but that doesn't stop you from getting arrested if you match the description. Like, no, for real. I mean, at least in the US, France does appear to have a similar system. Use your rights, and when questioned, shut up and ask for a lawyer. Pister then claims that they will have DNA evidence in less than 48 hours, so keeping him there in the meantime is the move, rather than letting him roam free. Pister takes Kate to go see Talon as she wants the guards out of the room while she talks with them. He gives her 5 minutes to talk to Talon as they bring him in. He's a much larger dude with an actual genetic reason, as we will come to find out, or at least that's what I'm hypothesizing. She immediately asks for him to have his muzzle removed. She's like, this is a violation of rights. I mean, if he's been violent or spitting, like I'm pretty sure they add those to prevent that from happening. Like, I don't think this is a violation of human rights. Then again, I'm not a lawyer, so if you are a lawyer, is that a violation? There's bound to be one lawyer in this subcount somewhere. She begins speaking with him as he says nothing. Kate then asks to remove his handcuffs, as Pister at first is like, that's not happening, but eventually he allows it since he's chained to the floor. This gets Talon to speak as he asks about his mother. As Talon goes to mention his father, Pister then breaks in saying the interview is finished. Little sus there, brother. Escorting him out, he grabs the arm of Kate, saying, help me, as Gavin then rushes in like a huge dork, and like a newborn giraffe standing up for the first time in terms of coordination with this rescue. He leads Kate out as they just kind of sit there and tase Talon several times. Like, is that standard protocol? In France, probably. Later that day, Gavin talks about how his arm was scratched and his glasses went flying. I never saw his flying glasses, but as they drive to Talon's mother's house, they go down some serious back roads as they finally get to the house in the middle of nowhere. As they talk to the mother, she says there's no way he could have gone out that night. He was very sick. He has some sickness where he can't move for days or sometimes even get out of bed. Their family is from Romania, and the uncle had the same condition as Talon but was taken out in the war before it became too severe. Also, I mean, the uncle, how old was the uncle? Well, I mean, I guess 2023, this guy's supposed to be 30, that would put it at 90s. Maybe the uncle was born. What war? Like, is she referencing World War II? I don't think the uncle would be in that. Anyways, this is... I just realized this is probably like the first indicator that this mom just straight lies. So the mother goes on to say the condition is passed down to the men in the family sometimes, but not the women. This indicates that his specific genetic disease is very specific to a particular chromosome, but it doesn't seem like it's really related to the Y chromosome, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So their bones are longer than normal, but also weaker than normal, as she says. 5'8" gang, rise up. She says nobody has ever been able to help them. The father met his end in a car accident years ago, and Kate asks why they are convinced Talon is guilty, which she responds that they are after our land. Then someone throws a rock through the window that says killer, which is bizarre as they were in the middle of nowhere. They didn't hear any car show up, and all they had to do was go outside to see who threw it, because obviously they're not going to be gone. Like, I mean, unless they were doing a drive-by, in which case they'll have to turn around. It just really doesn't make sense. So this tells us several things happening to form the idea of what is going on specifically with this family. First and foremost, this specific disease is passed down to the men of the family rather than the women, and this is known as a autosomal recessive gene. This is when two parents who are unaffected by the disease are also carriers of said genetic disease, or for this to properly work with Talon, we are going to have another defect in place as well in order to explain the differences in physical appearance, because the disease that I think this is located on the X chromosome, and if the mother only donates an X and the father can donate an X or Y, either this would result in Talon being a female who has this, and if he was a male, that would mean it would be on the X chromosome, so the father could not donate an X chromosome unless there was an issue to actually make Talon a male and have this disease. We'll get there. With Talon's mother and late father, it's likely that both of them were carriers of what Talon was afflicted with, likely passed down through the grandparents by Talon's father, and also, just coincidentally, by bad luck, the mother had it as well, which resulted in a presentation of the disease in his uncle, but not his father. By chance, the mother being a carrier would have resulted in presentation of the disease with Talon as well. So really, it's just, again, based on bad luck that Talon has become what he is. So, when they were back at the trendy flat, Eric now has just a complete, well-versed education in nuclear waste, having gotten information from parts unknown. Basically, the clay under the family's homestead was very dense, perfect for storing nuclear waste, but the family declined their offer for the property to be bought. The storage site would have brought in a lot of money for the town, roughly 30 million euros, and we call that motive. Gavin at this point is beginning to show an immune response of sorts as he starts coughing that night. Kate has lost her necklace, but she's also not sure where that went, and after discussing Talon's symptoms and appearance, Gavin believes it may be porphyria, longer bones, increased hair growth, receding gums making the teeth look longer, crippling joint pain, muscle weakness, nerve damage, and seizures. Basically all the fun things in life. They will schedule a test for Talon the following day, as Kate says she's going home. So what exactly is porphyria? I'm glad you asked. Porphyria is a disease that refers to a group of rare disorders within the body that results in a buildup of natural chemicals called porphyrins in that body. When natural chemicals build up and cannot be properly processed, this is typically due to inadequate production or complete lack of production of a certain enzyme needed to process and utilize those chemicals. Porphyrins themselves are needed to make heme, which is a part of hemoglobin, and emia, presence of the blood, which is found within red blood cells that carry oxygen. This protein is absolutely vital to your survival, so within this not being adequately created and this pre-production material beginning to build up in the body, this leads to a cascade of consequences within the human meat suit. So we know currently there are 8 enzymes that are needed to actually help facilitate the movement of porphyrin into becoming heme, but I'll give you the greatest hits. They are glutamyl tRNA synthase, glutamyl tRNA reductase, glutamate 1, semialdehyde 2, 1-aminomutase. Fun names, I know, but this highlights how an issue can arise. There are so many things needed to basically get this done. Life itself being a chemical reaction that keeps us going means that if something is not operating as it should, potentially due to its absence, it can have far-reaching implications or show a general genetic instability in a person. So now there is one thing to take away at this point in time from my ramblings just now, is the idea of a genetic instability. Sometimes in life, if a person exhibits problems in one part of their functioning of their body, it can potentially indicate issues elsewhere, which I believe we will absolutely see, which supports my point of what I believe concerning what Talon is struggling with. Now, there are 2 types of porphyria as well, acute porphyria and cutaneous porphyria. Acute porphyria can affect the nervous system, which has far-reaching implications considering we are a nervous system and the rest of our body is really just life support if you think about it. These attacks are known and can last actually roughly a few hours to a few days, but it can result in a slew of symptoms, and I'm about to sound like an Advil commercial, but it's important to understand these as it will help support the ideas later following. Severe pain in the belly, chest, legs, and back, digestive problems such as constipation, nausea, and vomiting, muscle pain, tingling, weakness, numbness, and paralysis, red or brown urine, mental changes such as anxiety, hallucinations, psychosis, or mental confusion, rapid or irregular heartbeats that you can feel called palpitations, breathing problems, high blood pressure, and seizures. From what we will also see later, the big ones are muscle pain, weakness, confusion, psychosis, with other unknown symptoms. So the other form, cutaneous porphyria, with cutaneous obviously meaning skin, typically affects the skin in horrible ways. Sun exposure is the main culprit. Much like when people are albino, their skin appears to have difficulty contending with the sun, but artificial light has also shown that it can affect the body. So sun exposure may cause sensitivity to the sun, which is, again, they're going to have artificial light, and this can also burn their skin. Sudden painful skin roundness and swelling, blisters on the exposed skin, usually on the hands, arms, and face, fragile thin skin that sometimes changes the skin color itself, itching, too much hair growth in the affected areas, and red or brown urine. So as they wrap up their conversation, Gavin shoots his shot 2023, but she says she's tired and beat for the day and just straight turns him down. Oh man, been there. Just remember, and this is just Papa Roanoke talking, rejection won't kill you, and actually it'll make you more confident than you realize. Your boy used to hone his skills before meeting my wife back in the day by practicing this, and it was no real big deal when I actually met a girl I wanted to ask out. I just go up to a 10, be like, hey, you want to go out? And she's like, no. I'm like, all right, see you later. You just do that and you survive every time. It's amazing. But a word of caution though, don't crap where you eat. Don't ask out the girl at work. It can get really awkward. Eric then watches this interaction, which makes it 100 times worse for Gavin. He asks, what are you doing? And then goes and grabs a beer. Gavin says, well, dude, you really don't know me and you don't know my relationship with Kate. And then Eric goes on the offensive because this is like, I don't care about your personal life. You aren't going to win her back, roll tide. We don't need this distraction. All right, brother. First off, people have been punched in the mouth for way less. Second, another person's personal affairs really aren't your business. And third, the PhDs must have made you socially stunted or something, because what in the name of all that is holy was that? So Eric is what we in the business like to call the guy who has yet to been smacked in the face for saying something stupid. It really changes your perspective the first time it happens. Ask me how I know. So Gavin then dated Kate 5 years ago. They split. And now they are back on the case working together, so he wants another shot at love. At this point, Eric goes back to examining the footage of the attack. The next day, as Pister says the DNA results were contaminated, it'll take a few more days to get another test. Kate then brings up the nuclear waste site, as Pister says, no, haha, you're such a good lawyer. Don't bring up the nuclear waste storage site, that's irrelevant. So now they pull the police report on Talon's father as a result because that was a little suspicious. And moving into the freezer, we see what's left of the father and son. The father is missing the back of his head, good God, his jaw, and most of the meat on his left thigh. Pretty brutal. Also, the tongue was eaten as well. The only creature that could have possibly done this was an anglerfish, which makes the detectives a little confused as nothing on land could have accomplished this feat, let alone a man. Seriously, nature made a mistake letting those things come into being. I don't care who you are. They're gross. I really wish they weren't. I just need them not to be on the planet with me. Anywho, moving over to the youngling, what do you call a guy with no arms and no legs at your front door? Matt. Okay. Anyways, there's not much left of this guy. Arms and legs are gone. Most of the torso has been mauled, and he's literally been eaten. No joke. Kate at this point goes to talk to Talon as she's dismissed the cops. Kate starts talking to Talon and tells him about how the test was contaminated and tells him about the possible condition he may have known as porphyria. If he tests positive, that means he could not physically commit these crimes because his bones would be weak, which was suggested by the mother, and the muscle weakness also is a marked symptom of porphyria itself. Also, I don't know if I have been saying porphyria. It's not porphyria, it's porphyria. Porphrya. So if I say porphyria, it's because I'm talking fast. He agrees to the tests and then asks if he remembers that night, and he says he was sick. This is interesting, as with flare-ups, we can assume it is acute porphyria, which was made mention. It lasts for a few hours or a few days. He then hands her back her necklace ring. Meanwhile, back at Mama Werewolf's house, they watch how the cops came in and got Talon. He didn't fight the SWAT team, which, I guess you wouldn't, but they also get Talon's father's toxicology report that shows he had phenobarbital in his system 15 times the amount a normal person could withstand, which they allege took him out. Pister didn't do his due diligence and didn't investigate this, which was also a little suspicious. Gavin then calls over Kate and Eric, showing him that it would take 1400 psi to break through a human skull, and the maximum bite force humans have is 200. Gavin then has to go use the bathroom as he checks his scratch. It's becoming inflamed, indicating absolutely the immune response is increasing in that area through things like inflammation. We can also assume then that he has contracted porphyria, meaning that it is not just the genetic variant that Talon has, but also a component of a blood illness that can be administered through others via saliva. Now to this end, it's important to remember that porphyria itself is a buildup of porphyrins. Buildup can be caused by too much iron in the blood, viral infections such as HIV or hepatitis C, alcohol use, which if you're drinking that much, good lord, smoking, and even hormonal changes. given what we will see, allowing for this to be transmitted would mean that likely it could be a combination event, a virus of sorts like a DNA virus specifically residing within Talon. While this disease can be passed on to others, it allows porphyrins to actually build up in Talon's body. And now one of the things I do find rather interesting is the difference we will see within Talon versus Gavin concerning their infections, and this may also be predicated on their own genetic profile. So hilariously, Gavin's in like the next room, right? Like no more than like 7 feet away in this chateau. And Eric starts talking like mad smack, saying like, oh, he's the expert. He should be able to identify a bite. Bro, I don't know if you've ever seen a bite, but I mean, there's like things that are markers, like big canines, did it have incisors? Were they little chiclet Miss Kitty teeth? There's a lot of things. So calm down there, feathered haircut, and give the man a minute. Gavin heard him as he comes back in, and so he's like, he heard this man talking smack. He rushes in and does nothing. Eric then gets a call that Claire, the woman who was attacked, went septic and met her end. Now this could be for a multitude of reasons. First, the human mouth is very gross. Lots of bacteria in there, and obviously she was bitten and attacked. Second, hospitals are also gross. It's just by natural operation that the worst bacteria is actually located in hospitals. Like, I'm not even joking with you when I say there are some bacteria that I've worked with that were taken from hospitals that were resistant to hospital grade cleaning products because they had been there so long. And also antibiotics, good luck. So if that gets into your body, like after surgery, you better make peace with the big man upstairs because it's not gonna be good. And third, could something have been introduced into her body causing this disease? I believe so. It's all coming together. Excellent. The next morning, Kate brings up to Pister that he did not investigate the case correctly, as Talon's father clearly had stuff in his system that, wasn't looked into. She accuses him of ignoring certain events. They go to leave as Pister gets a call saying an animal took out some farmers' livestock. They enter the woods that night looking for the creature to determine what it may have been. As they begin their search, they quickly spot it in the area, which is no easy feat given that animals typically do not like to hang around the cryptid known as Homo sapiens. A bear then runs out as they put it down. Kate suggests that this was the animal that attacked the porters, and then they say, we will have to run some tests. Pister is shocked as there haven't been bears in the area for over 100 years. This will never be explained as to why this bear was here for the first time in hundreds of years, apparently. Maybe he just wandered in, I don't know, very odd. Maybe escape the circus. So that night, Gavin is having more issues. He is clearly sick and uneasy and having sensitivity to light. As he is called to join Eric and Kate, he mentions how some strains of porphyria can be passed by vectors such as blood or mucous membranes, and it doesn't have to be entirely genetic. And this is the point where it indicates it's actually a virus of sorts, causing a buildup of porphyrins leading to acute porphyria, which, as we all know, affects the nervous system in flare-ups. Eric turns on the light as Gavin then requests both DNA tests and wants the reports on them, basically, because he wants to compare them. Kate talks to Gavin about the case and says she is worried about him. Eric watches the footage and sees Talon actually bit Gavin, and that may be why he's experiencing what he is right now. And I knew it! It was rabies the whole time. Look, this genetic profile comes right off. Actually, it's not rabies. I know you're crushed. But could it be related to rabies? No. Maybe. I don't know. We'll get there. Heading to the testing facility the next morning, they get Talon set up to get everything done to determine if it is actually porphyria. Basically, they need to take a sample of cells from his eyes to determine if there's any evidence, and then they need to induce a seizure. So they agree to go start the tests. Heading down to the testing pit, I have no idea why it's shaped this way. Beginning the test, they take a sample of eye tissue by sliding a slide over it, which initially shows positive. Now, for your information, at this point in time, as far as I'm able to find, the eye test is a bit strange to confirm the presence of porphyria. Typically, a urine analysis is done, which is easier to determine a buildup of porphyrins in the body. There could be symptomatic expressions in the eyes, such as like a thinning of the sclera and craters in the cornea in sclera, but the swipe test to determine the presence of porphyrins just seems to be a rule of cool sort of scenario. Also, there's no reason for this next test. So to determine if this man has porphyria, which somehow would allegedly affect his bones, making him weak, too weak actually to attack people, indicating that if he hadn't attacked that night, he couldn't have committed these crimes. They have to induce a seizure? Yes, brilliant, why not? It'll be fun. A simple urine test, once again, could have solved all these problems, but let's strap him down to the table and induce a seizure, which, by the way, since porphyrins are light sensitive and an acute attack can cause seizures because it's affecting the nervous system, these seizures are known as tonic-clonic seizures, which involves violent shaking and can result in brain damage in some cases. Ah yes. Now where did I put that medical degree? This doctor is absolutely wild for this. As they flash the lights in his eyes, they start freaking out because he begins convulsing. Yes, that's what a tonic-clonic seizure is. Immediately he's like, Well, this is unusual. It's a tonic-clonic seizure. Spasmodic events are quite prevalent during those. Well, typically for this type. There's actually seizures where you just sort of like zone out and you don't move and nobody else knows that you're actually having one, and typically you may not even remember it either. In fact, there's plenty of evidence to support a lot of people who have seizures their entire life have them when they're sleeping and they just never know about it. But what is unusual is Talon immediately begins hulking out. Breaking free, he starts throwing around the doctors and SWAT team like a baby in a dryer, as somehow Gavin is the guy who survives all of this. So here's where we begin to see some fairly strange things that could imply a multitude of things. Now, all I know is the Southern Belle accent, but as made mention by the mother, oh no, my boy's bones are weak. And he's just a happy lad, awoo. I don't know if she said awoo or not, but that last part, on all levels except physical, her son is a wolf. This dude's bones are absolutely not weak. In fact, I would hazard a guess as to say they are stronger than normal. We can see this during the attack, as he does not suffer from like muscle weakness in that moment, though it may be possible after that he does have some muscle weakness. So this sets the parameters on pretty much why he's operating the way he is, which is also why he didn't fight the SWAT team and was walking the way that he was, because he essentially burned through all of his muscular strength. So first, Talon, when coming out of a seizure, is in a state of psychosis, and as a result, strength is increased as well as aggression. It is well known that in some people, after their seizure subsides, they can become violent and aggressive. The postictal state can occur hours or days after the initial period of confusion, and this is due to the brain operating at an altered capacity. Specifically, if the majority of the seizure occurs in the frontal lobe, emotional control is now completely out the window. You can think of a seizure as like a ton of neurons in the brain firing at once, and after this happens, it can leave a brain in a state of disarray even after consciousness is regained. Second, the increased muscular strength is a symptom of the psychosis itself. People who have entered this altered state of consciousness are currently experiencing an adrenaline dump, as well as having their brains no longer as effectively control their muscular contractions. These over contractions, as you can call them, can actually make a person, like a female weighing 100 pounds for instance, require several full-grown men to restrain her. My wife and father have actually seen stuff like this, as they both work in the mental health field. My wife more on the therapy side, my dad more on the orderly side, but it's literally a grown man per limb to control the person. Taking Talon's already increased size and being a male would make him much stronger than the massive nerds around him, or even an average sized person. Which we will get as to why I believe he is larger than the average person, and how it ties in to the assumed virus and how it's able to flourish in a much more non-hindered state. So Pister is pissed, as he knew Talon was a menace to society, and now he's free. Eric continues poring over the research and actually almost calls it what it is. The full moon, the seizures, the hulking out, even the word lunatic has the word luna in it for moon. It's called the lunar effect, as the body is 60% water. There may be an effect on the body as well, causing people to behave strangely during the full moon. This is actually pretty much false. You'll get somebody in the comments like, well, anecdotally, well, no. The phase of the moon doesn't cause people to behave more strangely because it's pulling water into their brain or something. So just be aware of that. But Kate goes to try to get Talon, as Gavin suggests. Well, I don't know why he said, I guess it's because he's succumbing to his own infection. Obviously his emotional control is beginning to wane, but he's like, haven't you killed enough people? Very nicely done, bro. You guys are for sure gonna get back together now. So you're probably wondering, what is the deal with the moon and how is it involved? Actually, believe it or not, again, while the moon does not affect your ability to like control yourself, with people who have seizures, it does have an impact on them. While it was found, it has nothing to do with the actual location of the moon, in the sense that it didn't matter if the moon was waxing or waning, complete apex full or a new moon. It really had to do with the amount of illumination at night, which is also coincidentally what I believe as well. It was found that when the moon is full at night, it illuminates the area more brightly, sometimes to the point that you can even see a shadow. It is at this point that seizures are more prevalent in people, but the question is why? Well, it's as simple as the idea that potentially your pupils being dilated lets in more light than, say, during the day when your pupils are constricted. To this end, you may be looking from darkness and then up at the light of the moon, which then changes can induce a seizure if you're sensitive to light. This is why people in movie theaters have straight up seizures, because the flashing lights, it goes from dark to light to dark to light. During the daytime, there's pretty much a normal level of light everywhere, so it's not causing that sensation to basically trigger anything. Whereas at night, if you're going from dark to light, it's going to cause it. And considering porphyrins can cause sensitivity to light anyhow, and Talon has shown his seizures can be induced by flashing light, it almost tracks perfectly with his own sensitivity to the full moon. As Gavin goes into the bathroom, though he looks at his arm and sees he's getting extra hairy, this indicates that in this area, the hormonal messages are changing due to the porphyrins, and there's a buildup in his body, specifically in an area of cutaneous porphyrins, which is causing more hair growth. Meanwhile, the SWAT team has cornered a building where Talon is. Kate arrives and is able to get in because she's a lawyer. I'm sure that would work. But Eric says Pister has no idea what he's dealing with. He has a condition that is affected by the moon, and it's daytime, and he's still like this. So obviously, I'm not really thinking the moon's causing this. But at this point, Gavin also slides his own eye and realizes it's porphyria as well. Tragic. Also, he dropped the slide prior and then cuts his own eye doing this like a complete idiot. Bro, you didn't have to use the serrated side. In fact, you could have used your finger to slide your eye and then test it. So, finding Talon on the 8th floor, he's hunched over and non-responsive. As he sits there, his bones begin moving under his skin as he screams and begins tearing the SWAT team apart. Ouchies. Again, the increased muscular contractions have an effect on the bones of a person. They can quite literally move shoulder blades into painful positions. Like, have you ever seen an illustration of a person with tetanus and how they violently contract? It can break bones, move sliding bones around, such as your shoulder blades, lock your jaw in place. The same process can be done through the violent contractions of seizures. One of the SWAT team members is then thrown for the window as Talon jumps out, landing and surviving the fall. All right, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna insult your intelligence. This is obviously a little more than what could be expected from just a normal infection. Like, this isn't possible. I don't care if you're Teen Wolf or not, the human body was never designed to deal with a fall like that, and given that everything seems in line with just a regular illness at this point, this shouldn't be possible. And yet it is. So how does it work? Well, again, it goes against everything that your body can do, but let's talk about it real quick. First, let me explain why Talon would bleed out. There is a ligament underneath your liver that not a lot of people realize. It's called the falciform ligament. It's not only is it thin, but it's literally sickle cell shape, and it connects the liver to the ventral wall. When you jump from high enough and land on your feet, guess what happens? The liver keeps going down while the ligament stays in place, which can literally slice your liver in half, leading to a rapid bleed out. Of course, this doesn't happen to Talon, which no, but because of this not happening, along with many other things not being turned into mincemeat or powdered bone by an 8-story jump, he's literally just built different. Also, bones that he has would have to survive a tremendous amount of compressional force. You're talking like tens of thousands of PSI on a femur, and this indicates that actually Talon would have a genetic mutation in the LRP5 gene, which is responsible for unbreakable bones, as they're called. These genes double density of bones, usually, which makes them resistant to fractures, and it's actually pretty cool. It's kind of useful, I think. Like, for instance, I've always wondered if potentially I may have this mutation because I've been in a lot of situations where I should have broken something, but the bone just didn't break. However, again, after an 8-story drop, I would be powder. So I don't know about that one, Chief. However, this still would not help us arrive at the conclusion as to why such a large person even exists. But we will get there momentarily when I tie all this together. Either way, Talon would need not only genetic changes, but changes to the structuring of his body to survive that fall. And the reality is, Talon wouldn't have survived that fall and been fine. But for him to, there's so many things that would need to change. So he spots Kate and then runs off Batman style. Gavin informs Eric and Kate that the DNA wasn't contaminated, it just straight up wasn't identifiable. And this gives us the biggest clue as to what's going on with Talon's genetics. So buckle up, because this is about to get heretical in here, and not hereditary, not heretical like Warhammer. It's just, heretical is not a word, but heresy is a word. Okay, anyways, we're gonna move on. So let's lay it out. Talon is larger than the average person with longer bones. Along with that, the bones that he has are stronger than normal. He appears to be infected with a virus, leading to porphyria, or a buildup of porphyrins in the body, which in turn causes an acute attack brought on by full moon's light, given like his pupil dilation, which then, after the seizure subsides, leads to a postictal state that is one characterized by being left in a deep state of psychosis and aggression, which can be seen in certain individuals. So far, all of this appears relatively human. But what we are about to see with Gavin will highlight why there are differences and why there are also similarities between the two, but Talon has the other genetic ailment that was passed down through his family that seems non-related to the virus, causing porphyria, but has far-reaching consequences, which is a comorbidity. So they drive out to Mama Werewolf's house to find her, but can't locate her anywhere. Pister is pissed again as he thinks she's escaped. Eric finally calls it what it is. This condition 500 years ago could have existed and people wouldn't know what to call it, so they would make up lore about it. He's under the lunar effect. He's a literal werewolf, which, I mean, sort of, but again, I feel like it's a combination of it that causes this man to act more strangely and appear more strangely. Pister suggests the whole family should be exterminated as a result. Bold move, as Kate continues to argue that they lived in peace for 50 years, but Pister then took out the dad because he was angry about them not selling the land. Kate then goes outside and enters a shed thinking the mother might be out there. Calling out to her, she doesn't answer, but the rest of the squad then shows up wondering why she's talking to herself in there. Going to leave, they hear something as one of the cops went missing and the other gets grabbed and brought up into the roof. They open fire on Talon here, and I can only assume he hasn't been hit at this point, and you might be asking how that's possible. Remember, Talon's uncle had the same issue that he was taken out during the war, so we have no reason to trust the mother now and her retelling of events. So likely the uncle had the same behavior as Talon, like it did get bad enough, and this seems to be a disease that is clearly going to haunt them for their entire life. So really, if the uncle had enough of his body replaced with lead and he was taken out during the war or blown up, it really doesn't matter what they are. It just seems if you replace enough of their cells with lead, it stops the problem. Also, a wood chipper beats everything. So there's this cave system nearby, and that must be where Talon retreated to, or at least that's what they think. Gavin nopes out of there, saying he can't explain as Eric asks to see his arm. He then grabs Gavin's arm, as then Gavin twists Eric's arm, indicating his muscular contractions are also increasing. Potentially micro seizures in his brain are beginning to alter his brain function as well, given the porphyrins are starting to build up, and it may be influencing his nervous system in non-beneficial ways. Gavin admits he got infected by Talon and is changing as a result. He then hands Kate a force multiplier and tells her to use it on him if he does anything stupid. So they have a nice hug as she walks out. Absolutely friend-zoned, my man. Now it's just Gavin inside while the rest of the people have gone to the caves. Horrific idea, good luck. Heading inside, we jump back over to Gavin, who looks at himself in a mirror. An officer approaches him telling him that I was sent back to get you, but back in the cave system, they ended up finding something. At the house, Gavin finds a secret door, and then they find a bone pile in the cave. See, they were not living in peace for 50 years. Take them all out. They were most definitely eating people, just never to this scale, probably backpackers or something. Gavin then switches on the light behind the secret door and finds a chair with straps. They were tying Talon down every time that he changed. And to be honest with you, you could have just kept him away from windows during a full moon or kept him in a dark room to accomplish the same outcome of him not becoming a French werewolf in London on everyone. But in the caves, the officers continue to get picked off by Talon. So they see Talon grab one of the officers as Kate then tries to talk to him. Well, that works about as well as a screen door in a submarine as he bites the officer and then gets filled with lead. Kate calls Gavin, telling him the mom knew all along. Heading back to the house, he finds the officer, or Gavin does, as the mom then takes a shot at him with an axe. Gavin asks, "What's going to happen to me?" as they fight, and she's like, "I am not your mother." And it's not even really a fight. He just sort of takes her out caveman style as the ambulance drives Talon's body to the morgue. Here we can definitely see the emotional control center of the brain, the frontal lobe, is being overridden by those aforementioned microseizures in the brain brought on by the porphyrins from the acute attack that Gavin is currently experiencing. So Gavin begins changing in the house as he starts shaving off all of his hair Britney Spears style. More emotional dysregulation. We also see several things happen to him. And before the hate mail comes about Britney Spears' emotional dysregulation, yes, her family is crap. That would cause anybody to kind of lose it for a little while and not want to be touched. I get it. 100% I'd shave my hair. But hair is increasing, likely it's caused by the hormonal imbalance and the buildup of porphyrins. Concerning specifically the eyes, it's clear that much like how people exhibit craters in their sclera, the high blood pressure is causing issues in the eyes themselves within Gavin, which is another symptom of porphyria, and it's causing the delicate vessels to burst and his veins in his body to bulge. As he has a nice yell in the mirror, the ambulance flips and Talon is back up in action. It would seem to me that the hits were not enough to take him out, but shock him as he apparently recovers. And I severely doubt it was due to any healing factor, but rather the prolonged psychosis he is in and the apparent missing of any vital areas leading to a bleed out. This is why you double tap. Eric then goes to look as Talon runs off and then breaks into like this hilarious sprint. Like when I was a kid, I used to run like a gorilla I don't know, it just made me laugh. But while he's running on all fours, they try to stop him from getting to the tree line. They said that they did 70 miles per hour in wet grass. Very much so doubt that, and Eric starts freaking out about how fast Talon is. Alright, so look, just surviving an 8-story drop, there's no explanation also as to why he can run allegedly 70 miles per hour. Even in the lore, it's stated werewolves can only run about 38 miles per hour. Anyhow, what's there to be said? There must be at least somewhat of a supernatural aspect, or at least a virus is like the completely unknown to us has altered his body to the point that bones and muscular contractions concerning strength and speed would be significantly changed. And then when he comes back down after this seizure, that's why his body's so weak, because it was expended so heavily during his psychosis. Alright, dude, the thing is fast and it's still out there. But because he did the smart thing and stood there freaking out while also being made out of meat, Talon begins his attack. Jumping on Eric, Eric tries to reason with a werewolf, and it goes about as well as you'd think. It seems at first Talon is listening, but then he just sort of pulls Eric's jaw off after a few seconds, ending that conversation. So if the speed is anything to go off of, I imagine this is about as easy as like pulling apart a piece of chicken because of the strength there. But next he goes to attack Kate as she takes off running. Going through the woods, she gets tackled pretty quickly as he goes to do the same thing to her. But before he can accomplish his attack, player 3 has entered the game. Well, Gavin has finally arrived. Knocking Talon back, a fight then ensues. The cops take pot shots as they then fight one another, with it ending up in the water, and ultimately Gavin gains the upper hand by beating the absolute snot out of Talon, and then is able to choke him out, ending this man's whole career. Turning to Kate, he's still human enough as she raises the force multiplier, but trick shot McGee in the helicopter ends up hitting her in the guts as Gavin then takes out the SWAT team and then throws one of them at the helicopter, sending it crashing to the ground and exploding, taking out Pister and all of his friends. Now, pretty sure this shot was intentional. There's no way it wasn't, and it's because Kate was on to basically the whole land and building nuclear, or burying nuclear waste and all that nonsense. But we now get media coverage about everything that happened. Pister's fraud was uncovered as Gavin has now agreed to an interview. He says that, he's totally fine as people keep going missing all over. He says Talon wasn't human and the reports are real. Humanity is really dealing with an actual werewolf. However, now it's Gavin who's become the werewolf. So let's wrap this thing up, given everything that we have seen with Talon and what Gavin becomes. We need to establish two final things. First, Gavin is virtually completely normal looking at the end, despite him changing every full moon, allegedly, given the sightings that are all over Europe. Second, he possesses the same speed and strength as Talon, showing there are some genetic changes to his body, but why were they different? Talon actually legitimately had a different genetic disease that then was coupled with this mystery virus. So stay with me on this one. It's called Klinefelter syndrome, or in humans, essentially it's XXY instead of with males having XY and females having XX. You essentially have an extra X chromosome. It may be tempting to think that it was passed on the Y chromosome as it seems to affect men, but look at what it does to men concerning their physiology. The men are taller, with longer bones, larger hands, hormonal imbalances, all the classics of Klinefelter syndrome. Like, you may think having an extra X chromosome would make you shorter, but actually it usually results in taller than average adults due to the extra set of genetic information. Along with this, porphyria is usually passed along by the X chromosome in some instances. So I believe the physical structuring of Talon is what made him appear the size that he was, and this was brought on by this genetic defect. Because this happened to his uncle as well, his uncle likely possessed the XXY syndrome, meaning this appears to be passed along by the males going back to the grandfather and even beyond that. And from here, because Gavin didn't turn into some hulking behemoth as a result and stayed the same size, it appears that a co-infection is present within the family because Gavin has these standard XY chromosomes. At some point in time, this DNA virus is passed along. What this virus is uncategorized by man, and may be very rare, but due to family proximity, it's likely it was passed from uncle to nephew just by being around one another. It's not known how this may have happened considering Talon had to bite somebody, but his uncle could have also hulked out and bit his nephew. It's that easy. So this virus is able to jump hosts through salivary glands, which may put it in the same family as rabies, just much less detrimental to the nervous system. It may be possible that when this virus implants itself into a host, the reason it is so detrimental to Talon as opposed to Gavin is because of the Klinefelter syndrome has a nasty habit of inducing autoimmune disorders within the immune system, basically making it attack the own body that it's in, and as a result, this can make a body less able to deal with the disease and subsequently make the effects of that disease worse. And they may have assumed that it was something like, oh, well, he's got muscle weakness or his bones are weak, when really autoimmune disorders can attack bone, they can attack nerves, they can attack muscle. It really just depends on what it feels like attacking. But in Talon's case, this has caused him to essentially ooze porphyrins, leading him to entering a prolonged psychotic state, whereas Gavin, who has a normal immune system, may be able to keep the virus in check more readily. But it still occasionally overwhelms him if the timing is right, to cause him to have a seizure during a full moon, further decreasing his ability to deal with emotional control and becoming overwhelmed by the psychosis that he has. The virus would have to influence several genes of the body, such as the genes associated with creating heme, leading to porphyria, bone strength, allowing for what we have seen, and muscular contractions, which would basically come down to how the muscles and tendons and ligaments and everything is connected in and of itself, which may have been brought on also, at least the muscular strength, by a state of psychosis. However, there are many unknowns about this virus, like how the survivability increases or the speed at which a person can move despite physical limitations of the body. Like, I'm not just talking like, oh, your body can't physically do that. Like, you physically can't lift, let's say 2,000 pounds in bench press. But the physics of the body and how the bones are structured and what muscle is actually capable of, all this has to be violated to move that quickly. And this does add a supernatural aspect, obviously, as most things humanity have deemed supernatural, though in the past, are really things we just don't understand yet. Talon's decreased ability to deal with the virus due to Klinefelter syndrome would in turn cause him to enter deeper states of symptomatic display brought on by the virus. Gavin, on the other hand, would appear more normal due to his own genetic profile, and only the specific areas of the virus naturally targeting, however, would change anything, which again may lead to the porphyrins to begin with, as enzymes are not going to be able to be created as well, because the virus appears to infect those certain areas and also alter their ability to be read and then create the enzymes necessary. But anyhow, I want to hear what you guys think. Clearly there are supernatural aspects to this, but there's also some very natural ones as well. Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed, please leave a like as it gets the video out there, and subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. I post pretty much twice a week at this point. It's a lot, but you guys seem to be enjoying it, so, you know, you're the only reason I can do this, so I might as well make sure you guys enjoy this stuff. I'll drop my merch, Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and channel links to Roanoke Tales, where last week we're talking about the Wolf Siege of Paris, how apropos. But anyhow, speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, huge thank you to our astrophysicist, Death's Dancer. Thank you, bro. Next up, our scientist, Chad the Enjoyer of Scientific Explanations of B-grade horror movies, Dakota23, Florian, Lacune, Lucian Dragon, Octavia Serpentia, and the last final girl on the left. Thank you guys as well. And to the rest of my patrons, you guys are really appreciated. Thank you for supporting this channel. You're ballers, and I love you. But all right, that's gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.